I'm gonna show you 4 ways to resolve excessive anterior pelvic tilt. So first, let's get started with going over what is too much and too little anterior pelvic tilt or posterior pelvic tilt. This would be the anterior version going forward. This would be the posterior version dipping back. There's a balance in between that's going to be the most valuable. So if you are sitting down in a chair, it'd be great for you to sit on a chair that raises your hips up above the height of your knees. So you'd be sitting on the front edge of your sit bones. So you can reach underneath, actually find those little bones, the little bony protrusions coming out of your butt. Drop yourself back down, drive the hips straight back, and then sit down through the front of those bones. If someone were to drive weight down through your shoulders, you should be able to feel that weight evenly stack all the way through your spine. If you go excessively far forward, now you're tipping too much. If someone were to drive that weight, you would collapse in this direction. If you go excessively back posteriorly, someone drives that weight, you're gonna collapse in the opposite direction. So it's finding the front edge of those sit bones and then create a subtle tuck with the ribs down towards the pelvis, create elongation up through the head, up towards the ceiling, and that will be a really beautiful neutral pelvic position. Similar thing if you're standing up, if you're excessively anteriorly tilted, then if someone's driving weight through your shoulders, you're gonna blow forward. So something you can do to correct this would just be, as a general test, is you could just squeeze the glutes, boop. As you squeeze those glutes, that will help to neutralize the pelvis. Another thing you can play with is just allowing those ribs to gently rest forward a little bit, almost like you have like a little bit like lazier posture just for a moment, so you're not in this flaring position. So general test, you're just standing around in the bank, give your glutes a little squeeze, but notice that changes the orientation of the pelvis, and then just allow the ribs to kind of subtly drift down towards the pelvis. That's gonna be a strong, stable, neutral pelvic position. Now 4 exercises that we can go through to help correct this for you at home is, bam, first thing is we're gonna do is get your knee, boom, up into the corner of a wall, bring opposite leg up, and you're gonna drive yourself back. So this is reversing the trend of what's happening when we're sitting in chairs all freaking day since we were in kindergarten, driving ourselves all the way back as far as is comfortable for you, keeping the ribs tucked the whole entire time as you're going through this. So we're avoiding the tendency of flaring the ribs out as we're going, borrowing from the lumbar spine to get what we do not have in the hips. So we're keeping the ribs tucked, driving ourselves back. You're gonna press the foot up against the wall for about 5 seconds. 4, 3, 2, 1, press, 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 and then relax back deeper into that on an exhalation. So start to open up some space through the quads and through the hip flexors. Go through 3 rounds of that on each side. And then the next thing, you're gonna bring yourself down to the ground, get yourself a weight of some sort. Kettlebell would work just fine. And you're going to drop that weight down into just the inside of the pelvic bowl here. So this is gonna slowly start and soften your breath. If you feel any pain, stop, get a lighter kettlebell. Make sure less is more in this for sure. And just breathing into the kettlebell. So take a few breaths. Deep exhalation. You can play with straightening the leg, bringing the leg back while you're keeping the pelvis in this more neutral position. So you're not excessively anterior with this. You're just keeping the pelvis tucked back a little bit, then slowly lengthening through, creating a pin and stretch in the iliopsoas group there. You can also play with rocking the knees, kind of windshield wiper the knees back and forth a little bit, get a little opening in the side of the ilium here. You could also play with side bending a little bit, back and forth, just starting to open up a little mobility and space in around the sacroiliac joint and the pelvic bowl and the hip flexors and all of the different things. And then switching sides, just finding any place throughout this abdominal cavity here and pelvic bowl that feels a little stiff, a little like beef jerky, a little dehydrated, and just breathing into there. You can extend this leg. And you can go with that really as long as you want to. Go for a couple minutes or so. It'd be a great thing to do before you go to bed because it's great for down regulating the nervous system, calming the freak down, making you feel kind of like relaxed. Next thing we're gonna play with is going with starting to close down some space in around the abs. So the opposite of this chronically hip flex position would be opening up through the hips here, and then also starting to soften and do some myofascial release with the kettlebell in around the psoas area. That is because the iliopsoas is connecting from the femur up to the bottom 5 vertebra. And what happens are the transverse processes specifically of the vertebra, and when that gets chronically short, it will pull that spine forward. So that's what we're doing, unwinding that. The next thing would be if we're chronically flaring ourselves like this, we're gonna want to start to engage some of these abdominal muscles. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna go into a plank position. And I want you to actively drive your hands down to the ground, and also actively drive your hands back towards your feet. So what that's gonna do is gonna start to close that space in and around the ribs and the obliques and all these muscles that are kind of closing those ribs down. So if you previously had the ribs in that position, we're gonna do the opposite, drive through, get nice and hollow through the body, and actively pull those hands down towards the feet and hold this position. Now from here, if this feels really easy for you, and narrow my stance a little bit, you could play with starting to raise one arm up, boom, and alternating back and forth. Through that, I'm driving through this shoulder, closing this space from the ribs down towards the hips, then raising that arm up. If that's easy, you can start to raise the leg up off the ground as well. Then you can switch, boom, drive, raise the arm, raise the leg, and alternate sides through that position. So that's working on knitting up the abs a little bit, bringing those ribs down towards the hips, closing off that flaring type position. Last thing we're gonna do, if you are gonna be flaring in the front and have chronic tension in the front, there will probably be an inhibition of the gluteal muscles. So now we're gonna start to tie together and activate the glutes to stabilize the pelvis. So what we're gonna do is just play with some bridges. So what you're gonna do is bring yourself down on the ground, and you're going to raise the hips up off of the ground. Keep that pelvis tilted posteriorly, backward here. Bring your arms down on the ground if you'd like. You're gonna point one leg up into the sky, point the toes, make it pretty, and you're gonna really drive those hips up, really feel the booty squeeze, and bring yourself back down. Keep that pelvis slightly tucked, and then up. So my top position isn't this, it's keeping myself tucked the whole time. So the ribs are staying tucked. I'm actively driving my full foot down through the ground. Switch up sides. You can go about 10 reps for yourself with each of those at home. You could even add a weight here if you'd like. Same thing, reach the foot up, all the way down, and really actively driving through the full foot. If you'd like, you could also add a hip band around here as well to work on a little bit more glute medius and minimus. Use outside butt muscles. You could get yourself a barbell, do some hip thrusts. Another variation that would be supportive to play with, since we have a kettlebell, I'll show it really quick. I wasn't gonna show another one, but we're here, why not? Is playing with a lunge. You don't actually even need the kettlebell. Maybe we just won't do it with the kettlebell. You could add weight, add a barbell, add a kettlebell, whatever. But play with a lunge and emphasize driving that weight a little bit more laterally. So make sure you're driving the big toe all the way down on the ground. We're gonna place a little bit more weight on the outside of the foot while we're still driving that big toe down on the ground, and start to drive your hips down and start to really pull the hips posteriorly or backward to really drive that energy back into the butt. So I want you to emphasize that weight back into here. Press, 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 and then all the way up. So drop it down. The knee is tracking laterally, wide. Finishing in this posteriorly tilted position, and then off with the day. So that is 4.5 exercises to help to reintegrate, stabilize the pelvis, create a little more neutrality in that joint complex, and appreciate you guys tuning in. Subscribe so you get each week's videos. Leave us a comment below and I will respond to all the comments. Appreciate you guys. Enjoy your hips.